Welcome back to Purposeful Thinking. Please like and subscribe. Our video for today is part 2 of how Sunday became the day of worship.
Jeremiah. What is the major biblical event that takes place at the end of the book of Jeremiah, at the beginning of the book of Daniel, and at the beginning of the book of Ezekiel and Psalms 137 and Psalms 126? What is the major event? I'm giving you all the passages. By the rivers of? Where we? Where we were? When we do what? And they require a song. Who requires a song? Babylonian. So what ends up happens is that the exile marks a massive turning point in the history of God's people. And what kingdom was taken away into the Babylonian exile? What kingdom? How many kingdoms we have after Solomon? How many kingdoms we have in the Bible after Solomon in the land of Israel? After Solomon, how many kingdoms we have in the land of Israel? We have 2. What are they? And what is the name for the northern kingdom? Another name? Israel. And what was the northern kingdom constituted of? Who? The 10 tribes. And the southern kingdom is constituted of 2 tribes. The tribe of Judah and which other tribe? And Benjamin. So for you to be called a Jew, you have to descend from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. So what happens to the 10 tribe? What happens to the 10 tribes we find in the book of Amos, and we find in the book of Hosea, and so on and so forth. They were taken over by the Assyrians. Right? The Assyrians took away the 10 tribes, which is Israel, and then we have the Babylonians taking away Judah. So what we have there, when the Babylonians take away Judah, they lost when they went into Syria, what did they lose? Why was the names changed to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Why? It is a change of your identity. You see? Why was Abraham's name changed? Why was Sarah's name changed? Why was Jacob's name changed? Because a name change, a lot of time, change, it signifies a change of identity. Why when you get married, you change your name? You see? So a name change does that. So when Israel went away in Babylon, there's a lot of things that took place. The nation was never the same. Their language changed. Where they live changed. So when Israel went into Babylon, and after the 70 years, which caused Daniel to pray and ask God, when Gabriel come and tell him that he was held up into the heaven, it is Daniel calculating and realizing that the 70 years that was prophesied by Jeremiah had expired, but we have not gone home yet. So he started to ask God, why is this not changing? And most of us need to learn to ask God questions. If God tells you something and he gives you a time and it's not happening, ask God what's going on.
Oh yes.
So what Daniel did he ask? But when we not until the book of Esther, which picks up where the book of Daniel ends, and the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, which picks up where the book of Esther ends, we see the people sent back home by the Persian king, not the Babylonian one, the Persian king. By the time they went under the Persian empire, they no longer spoke Hebrew, they only had Hebrew in writing. A few of them were sent back home to the land of Israel. You following me? Are you following me? You following? Can I continue or it's too heavy? Alright, so let me see the hands who believe I should continue or it's too heavy. Alright. So what? I'm just joking, even if you didn't put up your hand. Alright, so what happens is that the Israelites, by the time they were in the Persian Empire, according to Daniel's dream with the image, who took over after the Persians? Who took over after the Persians? The Greeks. So as a result, by then the entire Mediterranean world spoke Greek. So what the Jews did, Palestine, speaking Aramaic. What did Jesus say on the cross when he was crying out to God?
It's finished.
Repeat it? That is not Hebrew, that's Aramaic. You know why I'm back tonight? Because by the time we get to the New Testament period, it's Aramaic the people in Palestine is speaking. Not Greek, not Hebrew. They read Hebrew, a few of them knew Hebrew by reading, but they were speaking Greek and Aramaic. That is why our entire New Testament, even though it's written by Jews, is in what language? Greek. That is why our entire New Testament is in Greek. And almost all Jewish literature between this time up until the Middle Ages is in Greek, Aramaic, and a few Hebrew sprinkling in. Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 11 is in Aramaic. Part of Daniel is in Aramaic in the original language. Because when the Jews went back home, their identity was changed. So they did not speak Hebrew anymore. They spoke Greek. That is why we have the terminology theology, because it's the Greek word for God. That is why we have church, because ecclesia is the Greek word for church. That is why we have those things, because their identity changed and they basically lost who they were. So as a result of that, we ever hear the term diaspora? When we say the Jamaican diaspora, we hear this? What does it mean? It means the people who are Jamaicans that live outside of Jamaica. That term is a Greek term that the Jews coined in reference to themselves. It refers to, where do we see this word in our New Testament? You tell me the first book that you reference when I ask you about the Ten Commandments. Book of James. How does James open? Greetings to the 12th tribe. That is scattered abroad. In what? In the diaspora. Which means the Jewish people that lives outside of the land of Israel. So what I'm doing here, follow me. As a result of that, the Jews become known throughout the entire ancient world. And what they become known, the pagans know them, and the Jews were known for three things. That it doesn't matter what group of Jew you're among, these three things always identify a Jew. Somebody give me one of them. The temple in Jerusalem is one. What's the next two? The Sabbath is one. And what's the other one? What is the first commandment? The belief in one God. What did the ancient world do? What did the ancient world do in terms of gods? What did the ancient world do in terms of gods? Their neighbors. Many gods. So how did the Jew look to their neighbor that they live among? Worshipping only one God. You look strange. So the pagans had a lot to say about this. And they ridicule the Jews. And they mock them about the temple. Because they said that the temple, how could you have a temple and there is no idol in the temple? Because there's no such thing in the ancient world of you worshiping a God and there is no image of the God. There's no such thing in the ancient world. Even in the Old Testament, when Jacob went to his father-in-law was going back home, what did they do? With his wife, what did they do? They took away the little gods, the image of the gods from the house. What did Israel do as they came out of Egypt and Moses was in the land on the mountain for too long? They ended up making the calf because that is what is normal. So the Jews had no image in their temple, so the Romans had a joke that they made up that the Jews was worshiping an horse head in the temple. Because you look weird. So the Romans and the Greeks attacked the Jews about the Sabbath. And they attacked them, but remember I give you three things that mark Jewish identity. They attacked them about the Sabbath, and what did they say about them? Somebody guess. What did they say about the Jews why they keep Sabbath? Who is the person that the Bible says must not eat? For free. The lazy person. So what did the Romans say about the Greeks? That they are lazy. That's why they keep Sabbath. So this is what the Romans and the Greeks said. That Sabbath. Let me give you one text. Let me give you a text that captures this. Let me give you a text. We learning?
Yes, sir.
All right. So this is what the pagan have to say. So I'm going to quote from a very famous Roman writer. He's one of the most important writers in the ancient world of Roman history. He's one of the best at it. His name is Tacitus. Tacitus. He wrote during the time of Paul and Peter. So he's writing contemporary with Christians. We remember, who know the story about what Nero did to the Christians? The Roman Emperor Nero. Who know the story of what he did to the Christians because Rome was set on fire?
Burned down the place.
He burned down Rome because he wanted to rebuild it, and then he persecuted the Christians over it because the Christians were scorned by the Romans because they were weird. The Jews is weird enough to have a temple and offer sacrifice, but the Christians were even weirder because they had no temple and they don't offer any sacrifice. And there's no such thing in the ancient world about religion without sacrifice. That didn't exist in the ancient world. The word, if you are part of a weird group now and you're secluded and you're by yourself and you're weird like with Jonestown, what do we refer to Jonestown as? What do we refer to Jonestown as?
Ghetto.
No, man, not in Jamaica. I'm talking about Jonestown that with the people that died, that they poisoned. What do we refer to those group of people as? A cult. The word cult is not a bad word in academic setting. The word cult is religion with sacrifices and all of that. We get that word from the ancient world. You see, so if you're ever reading any academic word and you see the word cult, don't assume that it means bad. It means religion with sacrifices and rituals and libation and all of those things. That's what the word cult really means. Okay? So the Jews were attacked. So the story that we have concerning Christians being persecuted is given to us by Tacitus. You see how important he is? He's the one who tells us this story about Nero. And told us that Nero married to another man and dressed up in a wedding dress. Those things are not new. So here what he has to say about the Jews. And Tacitus wrote around about 56 to about 113, between 113 and 112. Here what he says, follow me. This is our first text. Follow me. I'm showing you how pagans viewed Christians. Because you have to understand this to understand the attacks that will come later by the Christians. Alright, follow me now. So I'm reading from the text. Then the Jews say that a rest was instituted on the seventh day, because that brought an end to their labors. Hear what he says about them. Then because of the pleasures of idleness, the seventh year was also given to indolence, which means you love to be lazy. You don't do anything. Others say that it is held in honor of Saturn, either because the Idumean traditionally banished Saturn and the founding fathers of the race transmitted it. And I will cut here. What did they just link the seventh day with? What day of the week?
Saturday.
This is a Roman writing. What did he link the seventh day with? And he's writing during the time of Paul and Peter. Saturn. What day get the name of Saturn retained up till this day? Saturday. So anybody asks you what day Sabbath must be kept on, these are pagan writers who don't keep Sabbath that are telling you what they observe. So this is how we reconstruct the ancient world and understand it. So they are showing us that Saturday was the day that the Jews rest. So Saturday and Sabbath is the same day. For the pagan, it's Saturn's day. For the Jews, it's Sabbath.
Yes.
Alright? So you see, the Roman is attacking them here that they're idle. Then we have, we at this time basically enjoy the weekend and have work for 5 days. This is not normal. This is not what the world used to do. We work for 5 days now because of the influence of whom? Because of the influence of whom? Christians and Jews. That's why we have the weekend off. And then it become a political matter. So what we have there, I'm cutting for time. I have more texts on that, but I'm going to drop them because I'm just going to sketch it for you. When we put this on the website, you can go there and read it and develop your argument, critique, or take from it and use. So what ends up happening now is that if how many of us, almost a lot of us are Jamaicans, right? A lot of us. For those who don't know, culturally speaking, and I am not saying everybody's like this, so don't get upset. I'm just giving you a general statement. Jamaicans love rumors. Am I right or am I wrong? Jamaicans love rumors. Okay? Who know about almost all you're supposed to know about dancehall. I'm using it for the contemporary young people. We know about dancehall with DJs and all of that. Alright, we having dancehall what is called a clash. We know about clash. We have selectors who clash on the song, and we have DJs. When the DJs clash, what are they in? They're in competition, right? And what do they usually do when they're in competition? They make lyrics, and what the lyrics is usually consistent of? Rumors! Right? We can identify with this. That is the same way all the ancient world work. The Christians is going up against the Jews and they take rumors and use. The Jews is going up against the Christians, they take rumors and use. The pagans is going up against both, they take rumors and use. You know one of the things that the pagans said about Christians? That the Christians basically love incest because when they're worshiping the night in the forest and then they do all manner of evil. That's why they worship in the dark. That's one of the rumors in the ancient world about Christians. So what we do is take rumors and use it against our opponent. Did I just sketch for us the conflict between Jews and Christians? It carried over into the second century. The second century is after the apostles, correct? First century is the apostles up to the 100. John died around about that time. And the second century, we start a new era in the church. That means what happened during this time? There is no centralized leadership anymore. Are we clear on that? Why don't we have centralized leadership at this time? What did I just tell us just happened? In the first century, the apostles died. So no centralized leadership remained. Each city had their own leaders that was called bishops. Okay? And the forefront of Christianity during this time is not in the west. It's in the east. In the city of Egypt that is called Alexandria. And where do we see Paul and Barnabas was called out for ministry in the book of Acts? In what city? In Antioch, which is in Syria. Antioch is a forefront of Christian theology and Christian culture during this time. And then later on, in the 3rd and 4th century, Jerusalem become prominent and Carthage in North Africa. So anybody who tells you that the white man bring Christianity to the black people is talking garbage. Amen. Christianity is in Africa before it came to the West.
Long time.
Who is one of the most famous, for those of us who read a lot, who is one of the most famous church fathers from the Middle Ages, and the Catholics add up a lot of things from him? His name starts with A. Who is one of the most famous church fathers? He's the one who first write that anybody that commits suicide cannot basically make it into the kingdom. He's the first one who make this argument in a profound way. That if you commit suicide, you are lost. Because suicide is self-murder. Augustine. We hear of Augustine? Augustine is not a Roman Catholic. Augustine is from Africa. Okay? Augustine is from Africa. So what we have the Christians doing in the 2nd century, by the time we get to the 2nd century, we have the emergence of full-blown contention between Christians. Christians are writing against the Jews and writing against pagans. And we have what we call the apologists, because the word apologist comes from the word apologia, which means to defend. So when you say you make an apology, it doesn't mean you're walking around and saying, I am sorry, I am sorry. It means you are defending what you believe. And we get this from the book of Peter where it says, you must always be ready to give an apologia for the reason of the hope that lies in you. Okay? Give an answer, give a defense. So as a Christian, you ought not to be able not to defend why you believe in Jesus. The argument that is made that I accept God by faith is not what the disciples did. How does the gospel of Luke begin? The farmer treated something, no, that's us. Luke begins that most excellent theologians, I am writing to you to give you an orderly account of the things that has more shortly happened among us. And I am going to explain it to you. Having a perfect understanding, because I have heard them who are eyewitnesses and those who also wrong. So now I am going to set in order. Why? So that you may know the certainty of those things that you have come to believe. So Christianity is a religion that is based upon historical facts. Faith is not just believing with no evidence.
Amen.
What did Peter say? For I have not delivered unto you cunningly devised, when I made known unto you the power of God and the excellency of the voice that I hear from the glory. So Peter is saying, what I am preaching to you, I saw it.
Weakness.
Yeah, right. Weakness of these things.
So what ends up happening is that by the time we get to the 2nd century, we have what we call apostolic. So let me say this to us. Christians are usually portrayed as being dumb by people on the outside, right? Right? Outside of the Bible, these are not the only works we have for Christians. For over 1,000 years, the dominant literature in the Western world was produced by Christians. Okay?
That's right.
The most dominant literature in the Western world for more than 1,000 years till after the Reformation, and we reach into the modern period, was produced by Christians. And we have a massive amount of literature from the ancient world that is produced by Christians. And that is why we can tell you and reconstruct church history, because Christians wrote. And when Christians add a contention, so Sister Titus, you come and you develop a false doctrine, the Christians wouldn't let you just walk away with that. They would write in response to what you did and condemn what you did and make sure that the brethren are happy. So when people come now and basically develop false doctrines and spread it among the brethren, that would not be the early church. You would have done it, but you wouldn't be answered. And a lot of what pagans had to say about Christians, you know how we know? Because Christians wrote in response and have the texts in their texts. So we don't have the pagan texts anymore. We have excerpts of it that is preserving Christian literature. Because they answered what the pagans had to say. And the Jews was also writing against Christians. So let me ask this question and then we get into the meat of the matter now. Time is going on me. I have about 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. And I have a lot to cover, so I'm going to have to give you some off the top of my head. How was the Sabbath changed? I'm going to repeat it in the common language. You and I know that. What is the argument we usually make about Sabbath? How the majority of the world begin to worship on Sunday. What is the argument that we usually give? Nobody read this? Who do we say is responsible for Sunday becoming the massive major day of Christian worship? Constantine we usually say, let me say this, that's not true. No. That is why I said we have to correct a lot of things in this lesson. And when we are done, put it on the website, you can read. Constantine is the 4th century. And when I say 4th century, it means the 300s. We have references Constantine located? First, he was located in two places. In Turkey, the city that we call Constantinople was named after him because he moved the Roman throne from the west to the east. And as a result, they named the city after him. But what part of the church is the Roman church? In terms of geography, east or west? West. And we see Sunday worship prior to Constantine being mentioned. However, we didn't have any unified. Eastern writers were writing about this. For the first 400 or 500 years, the major part of the church that settled doctrinal dispute and deal with doctrinal issues is not the western part of the church. It's the eastern part of the church. When we talk about, for example, how many of us hear about this? Because this is a famous council, everybody talk about it, even those who don't understand. The Council of Nicaea. How many of us hear about this council? Never hear about this council, the Council of Nicaea? You have to hear about this, but this is the first of what we call the first ecumenical council, which means worldwide. It is the first. There was no western bishops there. It's all eastern. Okay? This is where the doctrine of the Trinity was finalized. This is where Easter was finalized and become the dominant way to celebrate the Lord's death in the western part of the church because it's not in the east. And many other things, whether a deacon can live with a church sister that is not his family or not. All of these things that come to the a lot of different things, okay? So what ended up happening, that is not until the 4th century, but we have earlier writings than that mention Sunday. But what is funny about this, hear this now. So we have one of the earliest is a writing that is called the Didache. All it means is the teaching. When we say something is didactic, it means that teach. So that's why it's called the Didache. In this we find reference to the first day of the week. And in it are the Lord's Day, which later become the first day of the week in Christian tradition. Because in John, what do we have in John on the opening chapter? I was in the Spirit on. So they take that language from the New Testament and apply it to the first day of the week. And then say John was talking about the first day. But that's not So John said, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. So during this time, the writer refers to the Lord's Day. Scholars and patristic scholars, because that's what we call the guys who study this theory, from the word patros, which means father, we get the word patriarch, which means homeland, the land of our fathers. So we have the Didache, and in it, this is the passage in chapter 14, verse 1. This is what the Didache is saying to the people that it's written to. On the Lord's Day, gather together and break bread, language from the book of Acts. Clear? Gather together and break bread and give thanks, having first confessed your sins, so that your sacrifice may be pure. So the idea of coming into church, saying a prayer to consecrate yourself, is not new. You see this? This document goes back to the 2nd century. Some scholars try to date it to the first, but it goes back to the 2nd. So we see him here saying this. He's encouraging the worshippers to gather together on the Lord's Day and telling them that they should confess. Quite possibly it's referring to Sunday. So we have this. Then we have basically another document that is early, and the Didache is an Eastern document. It's written in Greek, so it's from the eastern part of the church. Remember what I said about the Constantine? And this is written in the mid-1st century, about 150. How much years is that before Constantine? Over 100 plus years. Okay? We have the epistle of what we call the epistle of Barnabas. In this, it goes at what I described to you earlier, the battle between Christians and Jews. Who is the true worshiper of God? Now remember what I tell you. The Christians are not the only one writing at this time. The rabbis were writing and attacking Christians harshly and very vigorously. So we have the Christians here responding to it, and then here what the epistle of Barnabas Barnabas says, follow me carefully because it's a little bit lengthy. I'm going to skip out what is important. Furthermore, this is the exact quote. Furthermore, concerning the Sabbath, so they are defending against Judaism. Furthermore, concerning the Sabbath, it is also written in the 10 words, which is the 10 commandments, that he spoke to Moses face to face on Mount Sinai and sanctified the Lord's Sabbath, with his quote in the text, with clean hands and clean heart. And in another place he says, if my children guard the Sabbath, then I will bestow my mercy upon them. He speaks of the Sabbath at the beginning of creation and made the works of his hand and in 6 days and finished on the 7th day and rested on it and sanctified it. Observe, children. So the writer is going on now to interpret what these texts mean according to him. Observe, children, what he finished in the 6 days mean. He's doing exegesis. It means this. Follow what the writer is saying. That in 6,000 years, the Lord will bring everything to an end. For with him a day signifies 1,000 years. And he himself bears me witness when he says, behold, the day of the Lord will be as 1,000 years. So he's quoting from scripture to defend what he's saying. Just as Satan did with Jesus' trial. Therefore, children, in 6 days, that is in 6,000 years, everything will be brought to an end. Verse 5, and he rested on the 7th day. This means he's giving the interpretation of Genesis 2. When his sons come, Jesus is talking, his son come, he will destroy the time of lawlessness, and one will judge the ungodly, and will change the sun and the moon and the stars, and then he will truly rest on the 7th day. Further, he says, you shall sanctify it with clean hands and clean heart, to sanctify the day that God sanctified. Hear what he's saying now. We have been deceived in every respect. So what the writer is saying, when the text says that in 6 days God created heaven and earth, it's not referring to 6 literal days. Right. It's referring to 6,000 years. And the 7th day is when Jesus returned. We will truly be a part of the 7th day. So what he does, he takes the Sabbath that is literal in Genesis and in Exodus and throughout the Bible, and says that we will really keep Sabbath when Jesus returns. You notice that he's not making the argument that the Sabbath was changed by the apostles? Do we notice that? You notice that he's not saying that the 10 commandments is not valid? He's attacking the Jews.
That's right. That's right.
Alright, let me summarize the two. I'm jumping over some of them. And in this, he referred to Sunday in this as the 8th day. So he wants the Lord days in this writing. Our Sunday, he referred to it as the 8th day. Okay? Alright. Let me summarize what those two writing is. What is interesting about Barnabas and Didache, none of the two writers are claiming that Sunday, which is referred to as the 8th day and not the last day, is handed down to them by the apostles. But this writer in particular uses allegorical interpretation, which means you take things that mean one thing and says they mean something else. You see Paul do this in Galatians, because it is in the New Testament, when he says Sarah children refer to the old covenant, and Hagar children, which is Ishmael, refers to the old covenant, and Sarah's refer to the new. We see this? That's allegorical interpretation, because in Genesis it never tells us that Ishmael really refers to the covenant. Okay? So that's allegorical interpretation. So this is what the writer is using here. Interpretation in order to dismiss the 7th day as a day of worship according to his logic. Sabbath cannot truly be kept in this present age, but only in the world to come. Okay? So that's what the writer did. He's telling us that you can't keep Sabbath because, one, the Lord said sanctify the Sabbath, and none of us are truly sanctified until we are things in the world to come. So therefore we can't keep the Sabbath. That is his argument in this writing. Then we have another writer in the same 2nd century, writing from Antioch, another eastern location, that is called Ignatius of Antioch. Hear what he says now in his epistle to the Magnesians. Do not be deceived by strange doctrines. Listen what this writer is saying. Do not be deceived by strange doctrines or antiquated myths, since they are worthless. For if we continue to live in accordance with Judaism, you remember the battle that I tell you that is going on? You see it playing out now? If we continue to live in accordance with Judaism, we admit that we have not received grace. And if then those who lived according to ancient practice came to the newness of hope, no longer keeping the Sabbath, but living in accordance with the Lord's day, you hear it? And which our life also arose through him and his death, which some deny. Listen what he says now in his closing remarks in this passage. We patiently endure in order that we may be found to be disciples of Jesus, our only teacher. So he's basically saying, everything from Judaism that allows us to look like them, we don't want it. Understand that this is the reason why Easter was given to us. You can go and research this. In the canon in the Council of Nicaea, it explicitly said, we want to leave something for our posterity, which means our children after us, and not have what the Jews have. That is the statement that is made in the canon that refers to Easter. What we say canon in the section? Okay? That refers to Easter, that we don't want to do this anymore because the Jews do it and we don't want to look like them. Because what was going on at this time? What did I say the DJs do in Jamaica against each other? Competition. And if I am in competition like you, I can't look like you. But what's this? Scriptural. What did Paul warn us at in Romans 11? You are no Gentiles who are grafted in. Don't show up on Israel and boast against them. Why would Paul say this? Because it started to happen. And Paul warned the Gentiles that they should not do it. I'm making sense? You following me? Alright. Then we have a final writer in this section. I'm going to move on from this section and go down to two things. I'm going to try and knock out those two other passages, and I'm going to summarize them, so you're going to have to follow me. And I'm going to give you the laws that actually were put in place so you can follow. Alright, the last writer. Hear what this writer is and why I basically use him. And listen to his argument again. Finally, Tertullian, the North African writer, this is an African writer writing in the second half to the 3rd century. Tertullian, the North African writer, who is often referred to as the father of Latin theology because he spoke Latin, because North Africa spoke Latin, and credit with the use of the word Trinity, writing at the end of the 2nd century, in the beginning of the 3rd century. Hear what Tertullian says. Views, hear what he says about Sunday. And remember, Constantine don't exist here. Views the Lord's Day as figurative of rest from sin and typical of man's final rest, and say we have nothing to do with, hear what he's saying, we have nothing, he's saying Christians, we have nothing to do with Sabbaths, new moon, Jewish festivals, much less with those of pagans. We have our own solemnities, the Lord's Day. For instance, on Pentecost, because Pentecost became a Christian holiday in the Middle Ages. As the heathen confine, listen to his argument. As the heathen confine themselves to their festivals and do not observe ours. You know what he's saying? As the heathen does theirs and don't practice ours, let us confine ourselves to ours and not meddle with those belonging to them. Sunday we give joy to. But he also considered it Christian duty to abstain from secular work and labor, lest we give place to the devil. This is the first express evidence of cessation of work on Sunday. So he made the suggestion in his work, but it wasn't law. This is where Constantine comes in as important. If he made the suggestion that we should cease from our work on Sundays, was the church resting on Sundays?
No.
Because if they were, you wouldn't need to tell you, so let us do it. You following the logic? Are we following? As I said, you never hear some of these texts, so be patient. All right, I'm going to summarize 4 things that we learned from these texts that I just used. There are more writers I could have pulled from, and writers that explicitly, like Irenaeus, which is another church father, that tells us explicitly that we shouldn't keep Sabbath because it's idleness. Remember what the pagans said about the Jews? So you have writers. So what they did is take the argument that the pagans were using, that were Gentiles against the Jews, and adapt it as Christian language and use it to attack the Jews. Let me say this so you really realize what is going on. And then I move to division in the church is not good. Many of us don't understand why the church is suffering now, and we are blaming people on the outside. But let me tell you this: it is not people on the outside that first start to underline Christianity, but people on the inside when they have disputes. What is one of the most prominent things now on university campus in terms of belief that attacks Christianity? And most scientists claim this, that they are what? Atheists. Do we understand that the first arguments in the modern period that atheists used to accept Christianity wasn't created by them, but it's Christians who created them to attack other Christians that they saw that was less than them? Do we see this? Do we understand that some of the attacks that are leveled against the Bible now were not created by pagans, but it was created by Christian skeptical scholars to attack conservative Christians? Division is very bad. Let me summarize this section and move on to the next 2 everyone. So we learned 5 things from these writings. Here are they. The promotion of Sunday worship goes back to the 2nd century and not the 4th century. Albeit it was not unified, because you notice that each writer gives their own explanation of why Sabbath should be dismissed. What did one tell us? That Sabbath is 6,000 years, so we can't keep it. What did the other one tell us? That it's because of the Jews we have this, we don't want it. So you have all kind of explanation which tells us that there is no unification. When you read the Gospel of Mark in the eastern part of the church, they never mix it up with the Gospel of Matthew. When they read it in the west, they never mix it up with the Gospel of Matthew. When they read it in Africa, they never mix it up. Why? Because from the beginning there was unity that the Gospel of Mark is the Gospel of Mark. See what I'm saying? Why we don't have that here? Because there wasn't unity on the subject. You see this? The second thing that we learned, that at this time Constantine did not exist, yet all these writers lived and wrote from the eastern part of the church. Keep this in mind. The third thing, so far, the reason for the rejection of Sabbath is not scriptural, but to each his own justification. And the main reason is rooted in attacks against Judaism. The fourth thing, at this time there was no centralized leadership in the church such as the papacy. What is the papacy? Roman Catholic Church. The fifth thing, none of these writers view the continuation of view Sunday or the Lord's Day as a continuation of the creation Sabbath. None of them say that. You see this? None of them made the argument that Sunday replaced Sabbath. Alright, the beginning of the Sunday laws. As I have mentioned before, there was no centralized leadership in the church. In the 3rd century and throughout, during this time, the 2nd and 1st century, there was much tribulation that was going on by the Christians. What ended up happening is that in the 4th century, how do we usually view Constantine in the church? Negative or positive? The early Christians didn't view him that way. The early Christians never viewed him that way. Because what was happening to the Christians prior to Constantine? Massive persecution. He was the one who accepted Christianity and brought about peace to the church. understanding, he wasn't perfect. But the earliest Christians don't view him negative the way we, because they saw him as an help as opposed to an hindrance. So what Constantine did when he came into power is that after a while he paused and did it. This is what we always refer to as the law that changed the day of worship from Sabbath to Sunday. But watch this, let me make some observations. Let me jump to the law because my time is running out. Here is the edict. Remember I said to you that Tertullian was the first to suggest that we should abstain from work on the Lord's Day. Here, Constantine law. Listen to it. Some of you hearing it for the first time. On the venerable day of the sun, which means the unconquerable sun, let the magistrates, which is the officials, and the people reside in cities. Where? In cities. Rest and let all workshops be closed in the country. However, persons engaged in agriculture may freely work lawfully and continue their pursuit. Because it often happens, another day is not suitable for grain sowing or for vine planting, lest by neglecting the proper moment for such operations, the bounty of heaven should be lost. So why is he saying the farmer should keep on working? Because it was an agricultural society. And if we stop them, it might cause us to lose money. Yes. And so then it was written, so he wrote this on the 7th of March. So he said, this is the two. Given on the 7th of March, Crispus and Constantine being council, each of them for the second time. The council in the Roman government is the equivalent of the president. So he was that person, the emperor. By the time we get to move from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, the governmental structure was slightly different. So the council is the equivalent. Because what we have now as Congress and the Senate is actually a Roman word, which means old men. And that's where we get our governmental structure from. We get the structure of how the U.S. government is from the Romans, and we get the ideas from the Greeks, democracy. The Greeks are the first to present the democratic government. All right, listen to this now. This law, so this is what the law do. I just read the law, let me summarize it. This law brought about some unity around Sunday. Because if there was unified rest in the Roman Empire at this time on Sunday, would Constantine need to enact such a law?
No.
Make sense? This law brought about some unity on Sunday and made it easier for Christians living in the city to get their day off to attend church, even though it seems this was not its purpose. Also, we learned from Eusebius, which is one of the earliest church historians, that his soldiers had to pray on this day, even though the masses was not commanded to. So from Constantine, we see the beginning of the sacralization of Sunday. Because now we made a rule that don't work. Those of us who grew up in the Caribbean, what happened on Sundays? We have shops open and all of these things? No! And even here, but because we are becoming more and more secularized, the big box shops here want to now open on Sunday and want to open on Thanksgiving and want to do all of that because it's about what? Why did Constantine say the people in the city alone to the rest? Money. And while we have Macy's and we have Target and we have Walmart and we have all of them that want to open back now on Sunday. Money. You see? So the way we have Sunday now, it's not because Sunday was so from the beginning. There are specific laws that cause it. Let me run on real fast. Since the edict of Constantine, so there are leaders after Constantine that made law. Listen to the laws now. Listen to me carefully. Since the date of Constantine edict, Eusebius mentioned a law by which he enjoined the Christian sections of his army to rest on the Lord's Day from their military exercise. So Constantine also made a separate law for the army. From their military exercise to repair with diligence the divine worship. By another law, he is said to have desired that his pagan soldiers lay aside their arms on that day and repair the fields. So he make another law for the pagan soldiers not to worship because they don't worship the Christian God, but to go and work in the fields. Where they were to offer up a prayer composed by himself to the supreme king of all. About 60 years later, the transaction of business was forbidden by Theodosius the Great, AD 386, who is, in the words of Canon Robertson, also abolished the spectacles, which is the games on Sundays that you go for entertainment. Abolished the spectacles in which the heathen had found their consolation when the day had been set apart for other secular uses by Constantine. Theodosius the Younger, AD 425, in legislating on the subject, stated that the honors due to the emperor, because the emperor's birthday was actually celebrated as a day of honor and worship and all of that sort of thing in the earlier period before Christians, but they continued the practice. The emperor's birthday was a holiday. Everybody have fun, have merrymaking. But the Theodosius outlawed that. In legislation on the subject, he stated that the honors due to the emperor were less important than the observance of the Lord's Day of certain sacred seasons, which he specified. Leo and Athenius, AD 469, held yet a stronger language. If the emperor's birthday fell on that day, he acknowledged of it, which was accompanied by games, as I just said, was to be put off. If it fall on Sunday, just in Jamaica where Easter, if it fall on Sunday, we move it to Easter Monday, have 2 holidays. Same thing goes on here. They move the emperor's birthday to another day if it fall on Sunday. This wasn't normal. It's done by legislation. Was to be put up. It does not, however, appear that the Christians now greatly increase in number, so much objected to the emperors that all relaxation on the Lord's Day was unlawful, as these games being idolatrous, indecent, and cruel, and so unfit to engage in, they thought of it as going against the Lord. Alright, so those are the laws that was passed. And then when we get to, you remember why I said we're looking at the early church, so I have to stop at the 400s. In the medieval period, when Rome became the dominant church, European governments passed other laws like these and specifically ban games, ban you going to theater, ban you going to the orchestra, ban you from doing all of those things. So I have to stop at that period because I said the early church. Let me give you the laws that happened in the church. I have 5 minutes. Here are the laws that was passed inside the church. So as the political side is passing laws, regionally different group of churches was passing laws also. The first one is the Council of Laodicea in 363. The Council of Laodicea in 363 AD says, Christians must not Judaize. Who are they attacking against? The Jews. Christians must not Judaize by what? By resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's Day. And if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be an anathema. What does the word anathema mean? A curse. And it's in the earlier part of the New Testament, the word anathema just means curse. But by the get to this time, the word anathema means you must be excommunicated from the church. You take on a more technical meaning by the time we get to this time. So if you are found to be keeping the Sabbath, what must be done to you? What must be done to you? Kick you out of the church. So what do you think people will be doing if these laws are being passed? I am going to basically behave myself. All of these councils in different geographic regions demonstrate efforts to bring about uniformity of Sunday worship. Okay, let me jump over that and so that was the first one. Here's some other that follow. The Council of Eliberis in AD 305. This is before the Council of Nicaea, right? This is before Constantine made his edict. The Council of Eliberis in 305 AD very strenuously promotes religious worship on the Lord's Day and threatens, here this is what they did, and threatens suspension from communion. What is communion? Lord's Supper. And what did Paul say in Corinthians 9? For nothing you must not miss it. Corinthians 11. For no reason you must not miss it. And look what the Lord at the council made. Suspension from communion to any person living in a town who shall be absent from church for 3 Sundays. So if you miss 3 Sundays, you can't take communion. The Council of Gangra dates, which is doubtful, between 320 AD and 370, condemned those who makes the Lord Day a day of fasting. So in the Jewish tradition and in the early Christian tradition, you don't fast on Sabbath.
That's right.
Because fasting is a mourning, Sabbath is a festival.
That's right.
So you don't fast on Sabbath in the early church. And some people were fasting on Sunday, and the council make a rule that you can't do that. The Council of Sardica repeats the language of Elibris, which is if you miss 3 Sunday, you're out. Mentioned already, and the canon passed the Council of Antioch in 340 to the effect that if anyone came to the church to hear the scriptures read and the sermon preached, but refused to join into the prayers or the reception of Holy Eucharist, which is Lord's Supper, the same thing, which was administered every Sunday at this time, he was to be excommunicated or reduced to the state of a penitent as one who had brought confusion and disorder into the church. The first council of Toledo, AD 400, enforced the same point. The council of Carthage in AD 436 added if anyone left the church while the sacrodos, which means the priest, which is the person that is preaching, not technically the priest in the Roman Catholic sense, was preaching, he was to be excommunicated. The fourth council of Carthage discouraged going to the games or Republic Circus or the Lord's Day. And also we have other laws that says you can't exchange money on Sunday. These were other